After almost 15 years living in Japan and multiple trips through all 47 prefectures, I know what goes into a killer trip and what kills a trip stone dead. So if you want brutally honest advice about how to make your trip smoother than riding the Shinkansen while eating an ice cream, stick with me or click off and just go make the same mistakes that 95% of visitors make. Cherry blossoms. Yes, it's a pretty time of year. Everyone wants to see Japan at this time. But that's the problem right there. It's the most crowded time of year, which adds extra cost and stress. More queues, more people on the trains, and during this time, I've even seen trains completely sell out. Visiting from mid-March to mid-April for Sakura is insanely overhyped. See, if I really wanted to see cherry blossoms, I'd go north to Hokkaido in May. Because here's the thing, cherry blossoms only last for about 1 week, but for the other 51 weeks of the year, you'll still find plenty of unbelievably beautiful places all across Japan. They're just not pink. So general advice about when to visit Japan and what to wear is useless, or even worse, Tokyo specific. How do you feel about 35-degree summer days? Well, it depends on what you're used to, right? Use WeatherSpark to check the actual data on the actual place you're visiting and compare it to your home base. That's the best way of getting an accurate view of what to expect and what clothes you should pack. So I think there are two really underrated times to visit. The first is the early autumn, that's September and October, before we get into the autumn leaves season. And the second is the winter. Now what you get in both of these times of year is no super high temperatures, no super high humidity, and no super hot dog crowds. And almost everyone on the internet will tell you not to visit in June and July because that's rainy season. But it doesn't actually rain every day, all day. If you're flexible, it's a great time to visit. There's fewer tourists and gardens look amazing in the rain. Also, almost everyone on the internet will tell you to avoid visiting when it's the so-called Golden Week at the start of May. But you should also look out for just the single national holidays when they form a 3-day weekend, because that means an influx of domestic tourists, especially at the super hot dog tourist hotspots. If there's one thing that I always try to avoid, it's travelling during the morning rush hour between about 7 and 9 a.m. If you're thinking of taking luggage with you during these hours, stop right now and give yourself a good talking to. That's the plan of a madman. If you have to travel with a case in the morning rush, either take a taxi or if you're going back to the airport, take the airport limousine bus. So Japan has IC cards that let you tap in and out of ticket gates and buses, meaning paying the fare happens automatically. But you can actually skip the plastic card bit and use your iPhone for this. In the same way, instead of buying paper bullet train tickets, you can use the Smart EX app. But here's the thing. What happens if you lose or break your phone? That's your trip majorly disrupted right there. So my recommendation is stick with the physical versions and don't put all your eggs in one basket. And there's another reason not to use digital. It's because experienced humans can book way quicker than you with your fat fingers and your phone. Doubly so if you've got zero clue about where you're going or what you're doing. So do yourself a favour and head to the ticket office. Check the opening times on Google Maps and go early or late to avoid the big queues, or just head to a smaller station in the big cities. For example, Nijo Station has far fewer customers than offices at Kyoto Station. So back in the UK, it's pretty much the norm to buy train tickets days, weeks, even months in advance. That's because if you turn up on the day and buy a ticket, you'll board the train with only one arm and one leg. But in Japan, discount fares aren't really that common, and buying a ticket on the day doesn't carry an excessively high price tag. Plus, it's very rare for trains to be completely sold out. So, unless you're travelling during Golden Week or you're using trains with fully reserved seating, worrying about booking tickets months in advance is completely unnecessary. And when it comes to choosing places to visit, I've found that my very best lesson is to go to places that aren't on the end of bullet train lines. For example, in the north of the country, Kesennuma, you have to take a 90-minute local train to get there. Sado Island, over on the opposite side of the country, you've got to take a ferry to get there. And what does this mean? Well, there are far fewer crowds when you get there, and you can usually enjoy the places having them all to yourself. After such a long time living here and travelling all over the place, you'd be surprised to know that everything I know about packing and luggage comes down to 5 things. Especially outside the big cities, soap and hand towels or dryers are not guaranteed, so it's a good idea to bring your own. If you're planning on doing some sleeping during a trip, you'll do well to bring an eye mask, because often hotels and other accommodation have curtains in name only. I think that luggage forwarding will change your life. It's safe, reliable, and it saves you faffing around lugging your cases from A to B. Pay the money and then wonder why you never used it before. So if you want to free yourself up to sightsee without checking into your hotel first, go stick your cases in a luggage locker at the station. Whatever you do, don't wander around attractions with a case looking like a proper Charlie. So travelling light is my #1 game changer for travel in Japan. Less stuff equals more flexibility and more time for you to concentrate on, important things like sightseeing. The easiest way of travelling light is just to do your laundry back at the hotel, or you could do what I do and invest in some merino wool clothing. This means that you really don't have to do any laundry, unless of course you spill yogurt all over your t-shirt.
Yeah, I remember doing that.
Now, if you're finding this video useful, then I'm sure you'll love my free insider email. I pack it full of Japan travel advice, destination recommendations, and also hidden gems that I don't normally talk about in my videos. And when you sign up, I'll also give you my free Japan Plan Launchpad, which shows you how to plan your trips in the exact same way that I do. So go and check out the pinned comment for the link to sign up, or you can scan the QR code on screen now. When it comes to paying for things, Japan is supposed to be living in the future. But here's the thing, cash is still very important to have with you on your trip. Because do you really think your credit card's going to work when there's no power after an earthquake? So maybe you live in a country where if you get burgled, the police just fob you off with a crime reference number and tell you to claim on the insurance. Don't worry, you can carry around a wedge of cash in your wallet here and not worry about getting robbed. Welcome to a high-trust society. If you run out of cash, post office ATMs are all over the place and they play nicely with foreign cards. If your bank charges obscene fees for withdrawals overseas, maybe look into changing your bank, or get something like a Wise card instead. These prepaid cards are great for faff-free payments and also for getting cash from the ATM. You can also buy yen when it's really cheap and save it up for your trip. Of course, once you've used some cash, you will end up with some shrapnel. But since convenience stores and supermarkets often have self-service tills, if you feed them all those coins, you can walk away feeling a whole lot lighter. So there are many times when I've gone to a cafe or restaurant only to find that it was closed. Yes, even when Google Maps said it was open. So call ahead. Google Maps can be wrong. Ask, "Kyo aitemasu ka?" which means, "Are you open today?" And if they say hi, which means yes, then you're good to go. And if you've got no phone service on your internet plan, use something like Viber instead. When you walk into a cafe or restaurant, the first thing you're going to hear is a question asking you how many people
are in your party. You just answer with a show of fingers, even if it's just you.
And if an eatery doesn't have English menus, don't despair. Whip out Google Translate and use the camera mode to decipher what's on offer, even when it's handwritten. It's not perfect, but it's good enough to stop you from starving. Now, sometimes you need to find a table before you order drinks or food. So put something small on the table, like a book or scarf, then go and make your order. Now, I think amazing food is everywhere in Japan without the need to line up. Once, a friend of mine took me to a popular ramen shop in Kyoto, and we had to queue for a good 20 minutes before we got in. Was it worth it? Well, the ramen was pretty average, and the staff were walking around with massive chips on their shoulders, so no, I wouldn't go back. So don't queue for food. Save that time for more sightseeing.
Stand by, we are checking.
When I wasn't living in Japan, one thing that was an absolute pain when I visited was needing to make phone calls. Japan can be resolutely old school when it comes to making reservations for things like tea ceremonies, craft experiences, or tours. But if your data plan doesn't come with voice calling, what are you going to do? Well, if that's you, just install an app like Viber and call away. So when you're staying in Japan, you're usually going to find that the hotel Wi-Fi is really top-notch and very high speed. But the problem is sometimes they don't put a password on that network to make it easier for people to connect. But the problem with that is it's really insecure. So you should always prepare a VPN for those situations and turn it on. But what if your hotel Wi-Fi isn't up to scratch? And instead of watching my insider guide to Naoshima, you're stuck with the spinny circle of doom. Well, you'd be better off having a good data plan on your phone and just using that. And don't get a physical SIM card or pocket Wi-Fi because they're just going to add extra faffing to your trip, and that pocket Wi-Fi guzzles power like there's no tomorrow. Instead, get yourself an eSIM with unlimited data and you can be online moments after you land in Japan. It saves a huge amount of stress because you never know when your hotel's Wi-Fi is going to flake on you, just like that Gen Z friend of yours. So after traveling around Japan a lot, I've seen tons of tourists make loads of mistakes, and most of these have to do with communication. One incident sticks in my mind. I was at the ticket office somewhere and waiting in line, I couldn't help but overhear another tourist who was asking a question about several details to do with his ticket. It was something about the seat position, the side of the train, as well as something about the connection. The guy behind the counter, his eyes progressively just glazed over. See, this is just too much information for people. So the trick is to boil your request down to the simplest level possible. Ask one thing at a time with the easiest words you can think of. Now, gestures are immensely important in Japan and often carry more meaning than you would realize. And possibly the most important one is crossing arms like this. If you see someone doing this to you, just stop in your tracks because you're either going somewhere out of bounds or you're doing something that's strictly prohibited. But this gesture has a smaller little sibling. It's when people cross two fingers like this. People will commonly show you this gesture if you're trying to book a ticket or you want to get something and what you've asked for is impossible. Maybe the event is sold out, for example.
So while crossed arms is a very clear signal when it comes to saying no, it's one thing Japanese can't actually bring themselves to say. Instead, you're going to hear something like, it's difficult instead. So read between the lines. Something being difficult means no. And while it can be frustrating communicating with Japanese sometimes, it's best to bring along a bucket load of patience because we're all just humans after all. So let's talk about etiquette now. Things like don't stand in the middle of the roads to take photos, although I think that's probably common sense, although common sense
isn't very common anymore, is it? When I first came to Japan, I did a ton of research on what were bad and good manners, and I tried to remember everything, but it couldn't have prepared me for the reality of being here. And I remember in my first weeks, I learned the easiest way of figuring out what to do in almost any situation. I was in Ramen Koji in Kyoto Station, confused about how to order, when I just stopped and watched exactly what everyone else was doing. Before long, I was eating, and now I rarely worry about knowing what to do. So open your eyes and observe people. One place where there are tons of etiquette rules is on the trains, and especially if you're travelling with your friend or spouse, you might be worried when you see people saying you shouldn't talk, while other people say it's fine to chat. So who's right? Well, you might not realise this, but languages you don't understand are immensely noticeable. It's like sitting in the Apple Embassy and the bland, characterless background music suddenly changes to the loudest heavy metal imaginable. And if you want to add extra volume, your voice is gonna stick out even more. So my general guidelines for using trains go like this. If 90% of the car is asleep, it's best to keep chat to an absolute minimum. And even if everybody is awake, it's best to use your indoor voice. And if you don't know what an indoor voice is, please bring your own gaffer tape with you, because I'm not going to use my own money just to shut you up. Fortunately, some etiquette is very easy. You can go ahead and drink on any train, just as long as you're not going to spill your Frappalappa Bambuccino all over somebody's jackets, because that's a big no-no. And if there's a fold-down table, that means it's okay to eat that bento you brought along. But if there isn't, save it for later. So one of the best and worst parts of Japan is the public transport. Best because it works well, and worst because there are far too many people using it. But instead of fighting the crowds, I find trips go far smoother if you work with them instead. So if I'm carrying a backpack, I carry it by my side or on my front. That way I can slide into spaces and slide out again far more easily than having my bag smack everyone in the face on entrance and exit. I mean, their jobs are probably doing that to them every single day. So best not to add any more misery. Up on the streets, you'll find a ton of people cycling to work or school, and yes, they use the same paths as pedestrians. No, it's not perfect, and yes, you should watch out. But if you're in a group, should you walk along 3 or 4 abreast and get in the way of people just trying to go about their business? You're saying no, but I guarantee some of you are still going to do this. When I first came to Japan, I had quite a lot of meetings, and along with the getting used to living in a big city, I had to contend with getting used to a different time zone. What do I mean? Well, I was going to these meetings, arriving on time, and yet I was finding that people weren't exactly delighted with me. And that's when I learned that on time in England translates to late in Japan. So if you're joining a guided tour, or you're doing a craft experience, or you've got tickets with a specific entrance time, remember 10 minutes early is on time. So arrive with a bit of a buffer. And this way you'll avoid stressing out the Japanese staff. Now, you've probably heard the very common complaint that it's hard to throw away rubbish in Japan because bins are in short supply. Yes, maybe compared to your home country, but newsflash, this is Japan and things are different here. But actually, you can find garbage boxes at every convenience store and railway station. Otherwise, just keep your trash in a plastic bag and take it back to your hotel. So while I recommend that you try to blend in with Japanese people while you're here by following these etiquette rules, there's one thing that I recommend that you just don't bother with at all, and that's bowing. Japanese people practice doing this for like literally years and years and years. So basically, when you try it, you're gonna screw it up. So don't bother, just say arigatou gozaimasu, which means thank you, and be done with it. Fast forward a few weeks and picture yourself sitting on the airplane and the cabin crew are up there doing their usual safety briefing. What's that? You didn't notice because you never pay attention to them? I can't say that I'm surprised, but you're heading to Japan, where there are things that are far more likely to happen than plane crashes. I'm talking earthquakes, my friend. So when you get to your hotel, do one thing for me: check your exit route. I hope you don't get caught up in a quake, but if you do, put some shoes on when you evacuate because there's going to be a ton of broken glass on the floor, and I don't think you want to add any blood to it, do you? And just like you do at hotels, if you're visiting any spots by the coast, especially next to the Pacific Ocean, I suggest you make a note of the nearest high ground. It may be a hill, a mountain, or a tall building. If there's an earthquake, it might be followed by a tsunami, and then you're going to want to get to that high ground immediately. Knowing where the high spots are in advance can save you seconds, and those seconds can mean the difference between you living and you dying. And on a lighter note, you should always carry your passport. It's the law. And no, copies or photos on your phone won't cut it. Now, my very best tips are coming up in just a moment, but before we get to them, why don't you go and take a moment to sign up for my free insider email? It'll just take you a minute and you'll be glad of all the advice coming straight to your inbox. So go do it right now. So after my first few journeys across Japan, I'd already found a bunch of hidden gems, but I'd already uncovered some places that were really very overrated and not really worth visiting. Now, the problem is that when you check the internet or even in guidebooks, they don't really give you a good sense of whether something is worthwhile or not. See, what I really wanted was an honest opinion that didn't come from the school of thought that says 100% of Japan is 100% awesome 100% of the time, because that just isn't true. And that's when I hit upon the hack of checking places on Google Maps or TripAdvisor and checking all the lowest rated reviews. If you ignore all the customer whininess, you can quickly tell if you're going to love or hate that particular city or attraction. That saves me so much time. But sometimes that attraction ends up being one of those super hot dog tourist hotspots that actually lives up to its reputation. And when I want to visit one of those, I often hear people saying to visit early before the tourist hordes arrive. The slight snag with this is that many tourist catchers don't open until 9 or 10 a.m. and you end up with a queue the length of a politician's nose. So instead, just turn up 1 or 2 hours before closing time. Relatively few people will want to enter that late, and the place will empty out while you're there, and you'll usually only need an hour or two anyway. Now, when cities like the Tokyo monstropolis have literally squillions of people scurrying around, I find it's a proper nightmare and a half to navigate from the subway to my destination. It's doubly daunting if you're lugging luggage around too, but there's a simple hack that can save you from this madness. Check on Google Maps and zoom right in on the station and find the closest exit for where you want to go. It'll either have a name like Southgate or a number. Follow the signs in the stations for the name or number and you'll escape in no time at all. A word of warning though, I've had a few times when Google Maps was out of date or plain told me the worst route possible. Once it still showed bus stops in one place even though they'd moved 6 months earlier. And when it comes to directions by train, it can get a little creative when it comes to routes. That's why I don't blindly follow what it says and why I use Navitime, aka Japan Travel, when I check the train times. Now, despite the idea being out there for more than 15 years, nobody's made an app for finding a decent toilet in Japan. Sorry, George. Yes, there are plenty of public bathrooms here, but they aren't all created equal. And often the toilets in stations are too small for the vast numbers of people passing through. But there's a super simple hack here, because you'll often find big department stores right next to major stations or even in the station itself. Big names are Hankyu, Isetan, Daimaru, and Takashimiya. These give you the very best bathroom experiences money cannot buy, and there's seldom any queuing. And for my last tip, Tokyo is hilariously overrated and the rest of the country is criminally underrated. So the best thing you can do is get out there and explore.
Why is it there are so many planes here? Could it be because we're under a flight path?
Imagine what it would be like if I were actually recording a video. Have a great time, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye. I can't do the waving because I'm holding this tin.